So I am really, really excited about tonight's honorees. And the first honoree is someone whom, when I was working with Americans for Financial Reform on Titles 1, 2, 6, 7, and 11 of the Dodd-Frank Act, was a personal hero of mine. She was a personal hero of mine because she was both behind the scenes in ways that most people will never know, and at opportune times, absolutely in front of the scene, putting pressure on her fellow regulators to do the right thing. Sheila Bair was born in a town called Independence. I'm not kidding, she actually was born in a town called Independence. And just when her country needed her the most, she brought that independence to Washington to serve as the chairwoman of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Now, back in 2004 and 2005, Demos and our allies, many of whom are in the room tonight, were writing and advocating about subprime mortgages, widespread appraisal fraud, predatory lending, but the Federal Reserve and the other regulators were willfully blind to the problem. Nobody wanted to be the one to take away the punch bowl in the middle of the party that was the housing boom. And then in 2006, Sheila Bair came to town. She immediately recognized the scale of the threat to American homeowners and to our broader financial system. She pressured mortgage servicers and shamed her fellow regulators into finally admitting that there was a problem. Even before the crisis, she argued for wide-scale restructuring of the adjustable rate mortgages that were a ticking time bomb. She actually then was able to prove that those kinds of rewrites were possible when the FDIC was forced to take over IndyMac Bank. And in fact, had the Treasury Department modeled their mortgage program on the FDIC's efforts at IndyMac's, many more Americans would still be in their homes. Sheila Bair also has the sense of humor that is frankly necessary when operating in a world when the conventional wisdom is so very often so very absurd. In a Washington Post column last month, she proposed a market-based solution to income inequality. Just like the hedge funds and the banks, every American should be able to borrow from the Fed at a zero-interest loan to gamble with, say $10 million per family. She said this. Now, she acknowledged that if everybody played by Wall Street's rules, we actually wouldn't have any tax revenue. And so we might have to go without things like education. But she quipped, who needs to understand the value of pi or the history of civilization when all you have to do to make a living is order up a few trades? So she's going to be writing a book. She's already written a book. It's coming out in September, and it's aptly called Bull by the Horns, and I personally can't wait to read it. Sheila Bair believes that investment banks should be allowed to fail, but the American dream of home ownership and entrepreneurship should not. You know, the current Republican chair of the House Financial Services Committee recently said, quote, "My view is that Washington and the regulators are here to serve the banks." Well, Sheila Bair is actually also a Republican. But she led the FDIC through its most challenging period in history, guided by a different philosophy. As she said, our job is to protect bank customers, not banks. That's independence. And that is how Sheila Bair, our first awardee of the night, has been transforming America. Please put your hands together for Sheila Bair.
Thank you very much. This is oh, thank you. Thanks. That was an extremely kind introduction. And, you referenced that Washington Post column that I did, and it was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, obviously, suggesting the Fed should just lend us all $10 million, and we could all do the carry trade. We could take our zero-interest loans and reinvest them in, Greek debt at paying us 20% or whatever. And the Post had actually solicited something from me. They wanted something funny for what they called the spring cleaning segment that they did, where you're supposed to do something counterintuitive, suggested we get rid of something as part of spring cleaning. So I said, well, let's just get rid of work. We'll just all do the curate trade. So they liked the idea so much, they ran us as a separate column. And we kind of had this discussion. When I gave it to them at the end, I put a little tagline that, Sheila Bair, former chairman of the FDIC, and, oh, by the way, this is not a serious, I'm not really suggesting this. And they said, no, people will get it. Don't worry about it. And I said, are you sure? And so they suggested, well, why don't we start off by saying you have a modest proposal? I guess they were thinking there were enough Jonathan Swift scholars out there, people that understand a modest proposal meant that it wasn't really serious. And sure enough, a lot of people didn't. And if you read the comment letters, the comments that were filed with the Post afterwards, it's really, a lot of people thought I was serious. And some of them were saying, oh, well, if you do that, then, it's the same kind of Wall Street attitude. Well, they just squander that money on, flat screen TVs and things. We can't do that. So anyway. It's tough being a regulator, and it really is. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. I remember you referenced the early battles we had in 2006 and early 2007 to get subprime lending standards out. The Fed had not moved forward with the authority they had, so I was pushing the banking regulators to get something out, working with the state regulatory authorities. And we were getting a lot of industry pushback. And so I'll never forget, in January of 2007, an industry group came in to see me. And it was one of those intimidation meetings, right? About 40 of them came in, and they all lined up in the conference room. It's me and 3 staff against, 40 mortgage bankers. And so they're saying, oh, you can't do this. You're going to constrain credit. Oh, my gosh, if I heard that once, I heard that 1,000 times. These abusive 228s and 327s, you all know what I'm talking about, these horrible subprime loans their starter rate was about 9%. It was that for 2 or 3 years. Then we jack up to 13 or 14%. They were push marketing these in lower income neighborhoods, and we were trying to get rid of these. And so they said that also, you can't do this. You're going to constrain credit. And so I didn't buy that, obviously. And so we did push very hard with the other regulators. And we finally got some strengthened lending standards out in June of 2007. At the same time, we were pushing very hard for loan restructuring because I knew a lot of the damage had already been done. Unfortunately, we had about over 1 million of these mortgages resetting just in 2007 with these hideous payment increases. And since home prices were going down, people couldn't refinance out of the mortgages. They were stuck with these huge payment resets. They couldn't afford them. So we were trying to get the industry to restructure the loans, convert them into the fixed rate mortgage at the starter rate, which the starter rates were extremely high. And we were told, we had a big round table, and everybody agreed we're going to do it. We brought everybody in from the securitization industry, the rating agencies, the lawyers, everyone. We're going to get it done. And then we waited. And Mark Zandi came out with a report, I think it was in September or October, showing that less than 1% of these troubled subprime mortgages are being restructured. They were all just going straight into foreclosure. So I had another speech in New York to give to a securitization group. So I decided to take them on it because, they'd given us all this happy talk about restructuring the mortgages and they weren't doing it. And so I said, we got a problem here. You need to get ahead of this. We need to get these loans restructured. And they were kind of, casting sideways glances at each other as I was talking, and I was finished, and, very scattered applause. Then a hand goes up in the back of the room. I thought they were going to throw tomatoes at me. So a hand goes out in the back of the room, and the gentleman says, well, you don't understand. He said, you can't help these people. These people will just go out, go buy the flat screen TV, right? The proverbial flat screen TV. If you give them a break, you just can't do it. And so I said, well, if you feel that way about these people, why were you funding mortgages for them to begin with? And he said, I'll never forget, he said, bad regulation. So in January, we were constraining credit, and by October, it was all our fault because we didn't tighten lending standards. So there you go. So it is tough being a regulator, and I've written this book. It's got a lot of these kinds of stories in it, and I'm really trying very hard to just tell the truth in the book. And I think this is really what Demos and the American Prospect do too. You're about, let's have an honest debate about what went wrong. We may disagree or agree, various people and constituencies about the right policy response, but let's be honest about what went on. And I think this group and the American Prospect, and particularly Bob Kuttner, who I'm sorry is not here. He called me once the skunk at the picnic, and I love that so much. It's a chapter in my book. You know, I really salute you. Thank you for this wonderful honor, but you've really contributed to an honest debate of financial reform. We still have a long way to go to get it fixed, but thank you for all your help and support, and thank you for this wonderful award.